Hello everyone, and thanks so much for joining me on our next lesson for our pre-U economics research theme on China and the global economy. Now this lesson is going to build upon our last one where we looked at the key successes that the Chinese economy has enjoyed as a result of the market-based reforms it began to introduce in 1978. Fundamentally in this question we're going to try to understand exactly how China managed to sustain such rapid economic growth for such a long period of time. 40 years ago, of course, those reforms began. So the rate of growth and the rate of change and transformation that has allowed the Chinese economy is really quite something. So how have they done it? Well, let's take a look. Okay, now our first point is really that the Chinese economy has maintained a high degree of internal competitiveness. The government and state system runs according to a meritocracy-based system where people are given roles based upon their ability to perform and their track record of performance. So they earn those roles by merit. It's a highly competitive system. And it is representative in the three core areas of the state, and that is state-owned enterprises, social organisations, healthcare and education providers, and the civil service. Okay, so throughout these key areas of the state sector, it's highly competitive. You would find that at the top level, at the highest level, you would find Communist Party members who are responsible for districts where there's millions of people who inhabit that area, and they then are measured according to their performance. There's annualized reviews, and those reviews encompass line manager reviews their performance, as well as understanding what has actually changed on the ground for Chinese people. So it's very much a 360-degree review-based process. Now, the degree of competition then fosters the incentives of those district managers to ensure that their district or their region are performing incredibly well. So they would work together with state-owned enterprises to ensure that those enterprises can be run to make the most profits and the highest returns possible within that particular sector. Now that has enabled some state-owned enterprises to actually generate a high degree of innovation, particularly over the first 30 years or so of the reform process. Now, of course, the rate of that innovation has slowed down somewhat more recently, and this is where we will later see how state-owned enterprises being reformed according to mixed ownership models of privatisation or part privatisation to encourage more dynamism still. Okay, but nevertheless, the Chinese economy has been internally competitive. Okay, moving on to our second point, and this second point is really the Chinese economy has maintained a high degree of external competition as well, and that has subjected the Chinese economy to Western standards for consumer goods and for capital goods that they may have been producing in their manufactured sectors. At the same time, of course, they were competing with other developing countries for the manufacturing jobs that they had developed within their economy, and of course that meant that that they needed to be able to offer a very low cost alternative, but at the same point there, they needed to offer high quality goods. Now, of course, they have began to move quite quickly up the value added chain, and are now offering much higher value added products, where you get Chinese designed and assembled smartphones and CT medical equipment and so on. Okay, but nevertheless, China has maintained a high degree of external competition as well. Okay, Now, of course, that built upon that comparative advantage that was developed within the manufacturing sector. Okay, now there is perhaps a third point that we could add into this as well, and that is if we consider that in the late 1980s, the Berlin Wall came down and other communist countries were really struggling. Now, at that time, you also had the Chinese student uprising in Tiananmen Square. Now, during that time, I think the Communist Party realised that their reforms needed to gather greater headway. And so the reform process was accelerated to some degree as well. And some people, some economists and policy analysts do believe that the fact that those reforms sped up after that uprising and the fall of communism has also helped facilitate greater growth. Okay, so in all, we've got three key reasons. These two are really our big ones because this is what China needs to make sure they continue to do in the future and drive their internal competitiveness even further by undertaking further reforms. Okay. Moreover, they need to ensure they maintain their competitive advantage when it comes to the external sector as well. Okay, right, that wraps us up for this session. So in our next one, we'll be having a look at some of the downsides of this economic growth and some of the problems that it has generated. Okay.